Hi, I'm Will Hamman. I'm the Agriculture and Natural Resource Extension Educator with OSU Extension in Pike County.
And I'm Amanda Douridas. I'm the Ag and Natural Resources Educator in Champaign County.
Today, we want to talk about some of our eFields research. We have an on-farm research program working with soil moisture probes with the different growers in each of our counties. So we kind of got interested in this a little bit because we have several growers who have irrigation pivots or interest in it, and we're trying to figure out how to better manage, these resources that farmers have put into their fields. I know some of the guys I've worked with, they spend a lot of money and investment and time putting up the pivot, and maybe a little bit less time on not understanding when and how to operate it.
Yeah, and the same thing here in Champaign County. This was my second year doing this type of work, and we have some information from farms out west who've been using irrigation for a little bit longer, a little bit more in detail, but I really want to bring that information here and help our producers and prepare if there's, future interest as we see some changing climate and drier summers and things like that in Ohio.
Absolutely. And that's a lot of guys, would say that's the biggest challenge they got through is, dry summers. So we had a dry spell and we didn't get enough rain. And now with the pivots, we can address that. And like you touched on, we get a lot of information from out west, maybe Nebraska or somewhere where irrigation is a lot more heavily utilized. But now that doesn't necessarily pertain to Ohio or to our individual growers. So that's why guys were really excited to use some of our research to kind of make better decisions. Before it was kind of the old analogy, well, it's dusty today or it's dry or it's not going to rain, I better turn the pivot on. Or, hey, the neighbor's running it, maybe we should go turn ours on too. So we're trying to address some of those concerns and figure out how we can, better help our growers understand their irrigation systems.
Yeah, really improve efficiency, fine tune, and increase profitability if we're able to.
Yeah, absolutely. At the end of the day, you got to be able to make money to keep on going. So we used a crop metric system, and this is a technology where I have a moisture probe in the ground. The probe goes into the soil about 36 inches and has readings every 4 inches on that probe. So on the right-hand side of your screen, you'll see a picture of a cornfield with the moisture probe and sensor there. The probe is down in the ground, so you can't actually see that. But there is a pole where we have a solar panel and then the reading device and a rain bucket. And that allows the information to be collected in the field and then sent to their mobile app, which is there on the left-hand side of your screen. So this is just an example of the app through Crop Metrics where you're in there, and it's giving you a breakdown of where that moisture level is in the soil, whether you need to be into that refill or saturated stage. And those are kind of parameters that are set previously in the growing season, so you understand where that level is and where it needs to be for optimal crop growth. So moving into some of our research, this is from Pike County. I've got two examples here. These are graphs that are generated through their app, and each of these spikes is going to show an increase in moisture. And these pictures here, it could be a rain event or an irrigation event. And I'll touch on that in just a second. But if you see in the background of each of these graphs, there's going to be a blue segment at the top, a green segment in the middle, and a red segment at the bottom. The red segment is going to signify that there needs to be moisture added to the soil profile. The green is going to signify that you're in that kind of optimum range. And then the blue is going to signify that you are above optimum water content. So you're actually not necessarily saturated soil, but there's an excess of water in the soil profile where that moisture probe is located. So looking at field one in this trial, that's going to be the top graph. There are several more peaks than you'll notice on field two. These two fields are actually just about a half a mile apart. So just touching on the variability, the field one here is much more sandy and a lower laying field than the one on field two. And so the moisture holding capacity just wasn't as high. So this producer was actually needing to irrigate more frequently to keep that moisture level in the optimal range for the growing season. So it was really important, that we were able to identify this and understand that we needed to add moisture to this profile, especially during different crop stages when that corn really needed it. So I have listed here that the average bushel for field one was 241 for the irrigated segment of the field, and was 214 for the non-irrigated segment in the field. This field's about 650 acres with about 450 under the pivot. So a 241 bushel is pretty exciting for a 500 or 450 acre average, and 214. This is also a yield contestant entry, so we actually did have some better yields in the field. Trying to figure out different varieties and hybrid selection, so I think that yield could have been moved a little bit up if we'd have maybe planted more of one variety. But you can see that by utilizing the moisture probe, we knew that we need to get water at crucial times to make sure that plant could grow optimally. Looking at field 2, we had a 243 average, so just a little bit better in our irrigated segment, and a 238 in our non-irrigated segment. But you can see that this field had a better moisture holding capacity where it was able to maintain more water in that soil profile. So that plant didn't necessarily call for more moisture. But what I want to touch on is that, a lot of people are going to see, well, this is only a 5 bushel difference. Well, in this field, the irrigation covers kind of the more well-drained and poor moisture holding capacity area. And so it actually increased their historic yield by about 60 bushel. So on a normal year, without irrigation, they would have only gotten about 170 to 180 with no irrigation. With the irrigation, they're able to bump that up about 60 bushels. That's pretty impressive just by adding water to the rotation. The 238, that's not irrigated. That's actually the best soil, the darkest, heavier loams. It's going to have better moisture capacity, and just typically out yield the other segments of the field, even without the irrigation. So the grower is really happy to see that, based on the plant's needs, we're able to get water there when we needed it by using the moisture probe, but then, get that maximum yield possible out of these maybe poor areas of the field. What did you see in your research, Amanda?
In Champaign County, I mentioned this was my second year. The first year, and you can look back at eFields 2019 for that, just had one grower, a couple different fields. But this year, I really wanted to look at how it affects decision making. So, for example, I had the sensors installed in 5 fields across 3 different farm managers around Champaign County. So the producers managing 2 fields had access to the real-time soil moisture data that you showed in the app to determine when to run their pivots. And then the managers of the other 3 fields didn't have access to that. Right. So my goal was to see how utilizing the online real-time data affected those management practices. It's a difficult study to set up and gain statistical data from, because if we tried to do a side-by-side comparison, I feel like the farmer who has access to the data, it would be hard for them to not let that knowledge really influence their decision making if we tried to compare the same farmer using the data versus not using the data. So that's why I went with 3 different farmers. But of course, you have a lot of variables that come into play. A couple of mine are seed producers, so we weren't able to collect yield. But let me pull up a slide here so you guys can see what we found between those that had access and those that didn't. Okay, so here you can see the soil moisture probe readings, and the producers managing fields 1 and 2 are the ones that had access to the data. So I highlighted those with the green boxes. And then fields 3 through 5, highlighted in red, weren't able to see it until the end of the growing season. Will covered the different colors and what they mean, so I don't need to go over that again. But just remember, the goal is to stay in that green area. So the producers with the access to the real-time data, I think it looks like they were really able to stay in that green area. They didn't drop into the red. They weren't up in that blue very often. And those in the manager of field 3, you can see he remained pretty wet throughout the growing season, so maybe a little bit on the higher end. And then managers for fields 4 and 5, we see, especially field 5, that dropping into red a lot more. And that field does have lower water holding capacity. But I think you can start to see here pretty clearly that the tool did help them make decisions. And feedback from the farmers who fully utilized the system, they felt that it really helped them be proactive rather than reactive. And this was really helpful in 2020 in our area because we got really dry really early on. And some farms under irrigation had a hard time keeping up because they went based off of what they were used to when they typically start irrigating and just weren't able to put enough on. Where they were able to get started earlier and actually started before the seed was even out of the ground because we were so dry. Another farmer that wasn't able to access the data until the end of the season, he's interested in doing some in-field comparisons to really fine tune how much water is needed. So that might be something we can do next year. A couple of different treatments of the amount of water that goes on, see what the yields turn out to be, and go from there and see what's economical in that case. So in summary, while not a perfect study, I think the results do show that data from the sensors does help the producer more accurately apply water.
I would agree, Amanda, and that was from all the cooperators with my segment of studies, that they liked having the ability to make that informed decision. What's going on below the surfaces is extremely hard to see if you're staying on top of it. So that the probe really kind of gave them a look inside of what was going on underground with the moisture holding capacity or just water in that root zone availability. So all the growers, I think, that helped me last year with on-farm study are interested in doing it again. Maybe even adding more probes. We're covering large areas. In-field variability might be the next thing they want to address, like in a comparison of maybe I need more or less water here or there.
Right, depending on soil types.
Yep. Yes. So.
All right, well, thank you all for your time.
Thank you.